What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Caught by Happy podcast. If you are new to the show, and if you don't know what we're doing here, let me just give you a little background. My name is Matt. I talk to regular, normal, everyday people who are just following their passions, just doing what they love. I like to talk about that aha moment when they realize their happiness was determined by the process by which they pursue their passion. Their happiness comes from the work that they're putting in. They've found the secret sauce, if you will, to finding purpose with their life's work. And that could take the form of a hobby or a job, an artistic endeavor, a higher calling to make some sort of difference in the lives of others or to just society in general. And today's guest is the complete embodiment of all of those things. I was awestruck by Hunter Leemon's passion for what he does and what his organization tries to accomplish. Hunter is the executive director of an organization called Sportable. And Sportable is an adaptable athletics club here in Richmond, Virginia. Richmond, by the way, is where this podcast is produced, so I was able to go visit him at their office, set up in the conference room, had a great little conversation. So anyways, Adaptable Athletics Club, what exactly does that mean? Well, it's a club that offers recreational or competitive opportunities for people with physical disabilities or some sort of visual impairment. We're talking about people in wheelchairs, amputees, people with mobility issues or some sort of visual disability. And this is really important work because without an organization like Sportable, these people who are very much athletes and very much active wouldn't have the access to go out there and compete, or even if they're not really competing per se, just the opportunity to get out there and play some sports. So I think you're going to really like this chat with Hunter. I was inspired by how passionately he spoke of their mission and of what he does there. He truly believes in it, and I think that makes all the difference in the world. That kind of organization couldn't thrive or grow and do everything it does for the community they serve without someone like Hunter at the helm. So we're going to talk to him in just a minute. Not to capitalize on what's happening in the world with social distancing, thanks to coronavirus, but it definitely would be a good idea to start thinking about getting your groceries delivered. I know a lot of us do this already, but if you don't, grab the link to Instacart in my show notes and sign up. You're going to get free delivery with your first order. They can deliver groceries from your favorite store in as little as 1 hour. So, it's a good time to stay home. Don't go out if you don't have to. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, and order your groceries from Instacart. Link is in the show notes. And speaking of coronavirus, look, this has gotten pretty serious. I'm recording this on Thursday, March 12th. Last night, the president addressed the country. The NBA suspended a bunch of games. Tom Hanks and his wife just tested positive for coronavirus. Tom Hanks, he's like America's dad. Italy is on total lockdown. All signs are just pointing to this getting worse before it gets better. They just announced a couple hours ago here that school's going to be closed tomorrow. My wife, who's a teacher, still has to go in, though, because she has to deep clean her classroom. And like I said, today's Thursday. Who knows where we'll be when this episode releases next week? I think Virginia, where I am, right now we've got like a handful of confirmed cases. We'll see where it is when this episode comes out. I'm not the type of person who worries about germs. I touch everything. The railing on the escalator at the airport, shopping carts without wiping them off. I just don't think about it. And of course I wash my hands, but I'm also a chronic face toucher. I'm always gnawing at my fingernails or digging at my eyes, but I'll say it really hit me yesterday. I dropped my daughter off at her tutoring, which is behind a Target. And after I dropped her off, I went to Target. And I was just very conscious of the other shoppers in there. I was looking around to see if they were coughing or if they had booger noses running all over the place. And hey, you're damn right. This time I used one of those little wipes to wipe off the cart. This thing has the potential to change our entire way of life, or our culture. And I don't mean that in any sort of like alarmist fashion. What I mean is that companies who have never embraced telecommuting before, they're going to have to. I mean, they're kind of being forced to right now because it's the only way that they're going to get any business done during this pandemic. So when it's all said and done, maybe our workforce culture will shift and working from home will be much more mainstream. But also social interactions. Maybe you don't need to fly to San Diego for a meeting with the board. Maybe you can just Skype in. I think social distancing might actually bring us closer to the people who matter in our lives the most because we'll have more time, more capacity to stay close with our families and friends. Video chatting with the team out in San Diego means that you're having dinner with your family at home on the East Coast. So on a human level, who knows? It could be good. On an economic level, hey, that's a whole different ball game, and that remains to be seen. So we'll see about that. But we'll get through this. We will get through this. Basketball is going to be played again at some point. I'm sure Tom Hanks is going to be just fine, and we'll squeeze a couple more Oscar performances out of him. Just wash your hands. Don't go anywhere if you feel sick. Don't touch anybody. Okay? All right. Now that we're all feeling great, let me bring in Hunter Leemon to talk about his fantastic organization that does amazing work. Work that fills a void for so many people. I sat with Hunter at Sportable headquarters in Richmond, Virginia, and he's a super great guy. I'm glad I got the chance to meet him. Here it is, my chat with Hunter Leemon. Hey, Hunter, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Do me a favor, tell me exactly where we are.
We are what I often refer to as Sportable World Headquarters, but we're in the Sportable office, we're located in the SCORE facility, which is Sports Center of Richmond. Okay. So whenever I'm giving directions, I always say right around the corner from Hardywood, because most people know where Hardywood is.
Right.
But this is our office. We've been here 11 years now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But isn't this also the place where people come play kickball or dodgeball and,
it is.
Like the 20-somethings meeting other 20-somethings?
That's right. SCORE does a lot of programming here. Then River City Social Club, or Sports and Social Club, does a lot of programming here. So dodgeball, kickball, wiffle ball. I would say anything that people think they can still have an excuse to be considered an athlete, they come here and they play. And there's a lot of energy and activity here Sunday through Thursday. This is a good place to be after work.
So there's a lot of different things that happen here, because I saw rock climbing, and there's like soccer fields, I think, or indoor soccer. Or...
That's right. There's two larger indoor fields, one small indoor field, one big outdoor field, rock climbing. And those fields will support, all the sports we talked about. There's a lot of soccer leagues here. But so during the day, you might have some work groups that will come in for, team building exercise, stuff like that. Then right after school ends, for about 3 hours, you get lots of kids that come through for training, sport-specific training and some programming. And then beginning about, I would say, 6 o'clock is where the millennial crowd comes in, and they'll generally be here from 6 to 11, sometimes midnight. And then sometimes on certain nights, you'll get the restaurant crowd that will come in when everything closes down, and they'll be here till 1, 2 in the morning.
And what are they doing here at that
They're playing soccer.
Oh, okay.
And so there's a lot of different ethnicities have different nights. I mean, there's a night where the Mexican population comes, and then the Honduras population comes, the Colombians come one night. And I don't know what the rates are, but there'll be 30 people that will show up and they'll play soccer. And it is some of the best soccer.
Really?
Oh, it's super fun. So that happens kind of throughout the year. I mean, I would say from 6 a.m. to 1 or 2 a.m., there's a lot happening here most nights of the week.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
So what are you doing here?
What am I doing here? Well, so I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to run an organization called Sportable. So we're Sportable, but we're an adaptive sports club. So we provide sporting opportunities for individuals with physical disabilities or visual impairments. So think wheelchair users, amputees, and those that have some form of visual deficiency. We've been doing that work here in Richmond since 2005.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've been at Sportable since 2008. And we offer 13 sports and tons of special events. And we do it all from here in this office. There's a group of 8 of us that are here. So yeah, this is our, like I said, we're a Sportable World Headquarters.
Okay. How did you get into it specifically?
Oh, wow. I like to tell people I was blackmailed into it. A shorter version of a long story, but...
it's a podcast. You can go as long as you want.
I go as long as I want. Pull up a chair. Was in grad school in 2008. Was doing the sports leadership program over at Virginia Commonwealth. And we actually needed some space to execute a program. And the gentleman that could do that was the guy that owns SCORE here. His name is Mark Grossman, and a good friend. At the time, I just met him. He was on the board of Sportable. So he was willing to give me the space for free, which is what we could afford. So that was a good deal. But in return, he needed a coach for his power soccer program. And power soccer is a sport where power wheelchairs put guards on their chairs and they move a ball around. Didn't know that at the time. Richmond is the world's largest small town, and I knew a lot of people. So I said, I'll find you a coach, no problem. What he didn't tell me was that soccer practice was on Friday nights from 8 to 10. and it was at the Deep Run Recreation Park out on the far west end. So I tried in vain to find a soccer coach, could not find one. So here I am. I'm the soccer coach. So I go out for that first practice. I don't want to be there. I'm relatively newly married. We don't have a child yet. My Friday nights are still relatively fun and filled with action, and here I am coaching soccer.
Yeah.
So anyway, I show up pretty bitter and in a bad mood, and I fell in love with it. It was, I just loved the kids. I loved the soccer. I loved everything about it.
So this was power soccer.
This was power soccer.
And did you know anything about coaching?
Didn't know the first thing. I had a meeting with Kristen Lessick, was the young lady that I eventually took her spot here at Sportable. Had a meeting with her. We talked about some of the basics. I watched a couple YouTube clips, which were great, but really went into it pretty blind. And it was just a great experience. I just fell in love with the players.
Yeah.
And I did that for 5 years. I did that for a long time. I got out of graduate school, took a job with the Richmond Kickers, took the Sportable relationship with me, and actually as a soccer professional or a front office professional, I was coaching. And then my wife and I had our son, Oscar, in 2010. And so then I really needed to find more time at home and try to alleviate that burden of coaching the soccer team. So then I got some of the pro guys from the Kickers to coach the team.
Oh, really?
Which was a great fit because it was a perfect volunteering kind of a community give back for those professional soccer players because they could do it through the sport. Mm-hmm. It helped them learn a little humility just to realize how lucky they were for their lot in life. So it was just it was a really good partnership.
How old were the kids on this team?
Well, I say the kids. A couple of them are older than I am. A couple of residents from the Virginia home. But our youngest player was Cody, who at the time was probably 8 years old. Cody is now a freshman at Randolph-Macon College.
Oh, wow.
Which is great because that's where I went to school. But Cody was 7 or 8 at the time, and I bet you our oldest was probably pushing 40. It's not like NASCAR, but to a certain extent, it's equipment driven. So if you can control your chair and you have good control of the chair and you have a good piece of equipment, you can play. And the playing field's pretty level.
How did those kids or those men or women too, or just men?
Yeah, no, women and men. Yeah.
How did they get into it in the first place? How did they find it?
Well, as a power chair user, there's not many team sport opportunities. So this was one of the few sports that was out there for them. Kristen, who was running Sportable at the time, and she started the organization. She was always very conscious of trying to provide opportunities where none existed before. I mean, it's kind of the origins of the organization, if you will. And so she knew a number of power chair users, and this was an opportunity for that population to play a team sport. And that's always important. Team sports are great because it installs so many values. It's we before me. It's fighting for something greater than yourself. It's sacrificing personal goals for team success, as well as you're building a sense of community and peer relationships. I mean, there's just so many positive things out of a team environment. Mm-hmm. And for chair users, power chair users, they didn't have the opportunity in most parts to play one. So here was an opportunity to bring that sport for that population. So Kristen did it. And it's funny, I don't know the origins of the sport, but it has a national governing body association now. Not coincidentally, as soon as I got uninvolved with the actual program, it's grown and strengthened. But we've got a roster now of almost 16 players. We've got a competitive team. That team is now traveling. But they have national championships. It's a Paralympic sport. Mm-hmm. So there's a pretty good infrastructure around the sport.
Now, are there other power sports as well other than soccer?
That we offer. A number of our power chair users cycle. They swim. We offer a total of 13 sports. And so it just depends on the ability level for each athlete. That's one of the things that we talk about. We serve over 400 athletes every year, and each one of those athletes is different with a different set of abilities. And so they each get an assessment, and we have to, ingenuity is one of our values here. We have a really good staff. I mean, our program managers are, Forrest, Kyle, and Amber are really good at assessing the needs of individual athletes, and then trying to figure out where within our programming model they can succeed.
Now, what are their backgrounds? Do they have backgrounds in sports in general, or do they have backgrounds in helping people who have disabilities or in wheelchairs?
So it's a little bit of both, and we've evolved quite a bit over the years. Forrest actually came to us. Forrest of all of our program team came to us a long time ago, but he came not too long after I started. Forrest has been with us for about 4.5 years, And so his background, he had a graduate degree in sports leadership, which was what I had. And over the years, he's really become an expert in some of the program delivery that he does. Matter of fact, he leaves next week. He's part of the national team that's coaching the Air Force wheelchair basketball team for the wheelchair games that'll be taking place in Texas in September. And Forrest was invited to that.
Oh, wow.
He's really worked on that skill set, and he's excellent with equipment, and he has a really good understanding that he's kind of acquired over the years. As an organization, we really moved to be more intentional about having expertise on the front lines. So both Kyle and Amber joined our team at the beginning of last year. Matter of fact, they just celebrated a year with us. And they're both CTRSs, which it took me a while to remember this, but CTRS is Certified Therapeutic Recreational Specialist.
Okay. How do they get that certification?
They're a lot smarter than us, so I don't know. They had to go to school.
Yeah.
But they have a very structured background, an educational background on how to work with our population. So they kind of come in with the skill set of having to understand a lot of the particulars, just about the health situation and the complexities of the population we serve. And then as it so happens, Kyle had a very strong background and a strong desire to be part of a rugby program, and that's a program we started last year. Mm-hmm. So that kind of drew him in, and he executes a number of programs for us, but his background, at least athletically, was on the rugby side.
Okay.
And then Amber is really an outdoor enthusiast, and she handles a number of our programmings. Her biggest team sport has been the wheelchair lacrosse, but she had some adaptive sports background at the VA hospital here years ago through an internship, and then also some work she did in the Northeast. So a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what's next? What's on the horizon for you guys?
Oh gosh, there's so many opportunities that are there for us. There's part of our ecosystem, if you will. As a nonprofit, a relatively small nonprofit, a lot of times I feel, just given kind of the resource structure of how we're constituted and what we work with, we can go as far as our partners want us to go, or as part of the ecosystem of who we serve is there to support, if you will. So there are a number of big partners that are in our area. So one is Sheltering Arms, and they're building a new rehabilitation hospital in the West End. And that is transformational for some of the population that we serve. And then also within the adaptive sports sphere, if you will, a lot of the best organizations throughout the country are affiliated in some capacity with the rehab hospital. So that's a big change in our marketplace. And then about 35% of our athletes every year are youth. So the fact that the Children's Hospital at VCU is building really a flagship location downtown, right on the MCV, or I shouldn't say MCV, the VCU Health Campus, that's going to be transformational, because that's going to be a state-of-the-art center that's going to attract kids from all over, and hopefully we can serve some of those kids.
That's a Children's Hospital
That's
location?
a Children's Hospital.
Okay.
So those are our two biggest medical partners, but then the whole medical ecosystem that is around Richmond, so all the therapeutic rehab offices, Bon Secours has been a good partner, HCA has been a good partner, a lot of the orthopedic groups that specialize in certain rehab disciplines, those are all organizations that we make sure that we're front and center, kind of top of mind for them, so they can bring athletes to us. And there's been an awful lot of investment in strengthening in all of those organizations, because as a population, we're getting older, right?
Right.
So by that same rationale, the counties are also a big partner. And really all the municipalities. Our three biggest partners on the municipality side are the City of Richmond, Chesterfield County, and Henrico County. So we do programming with them. We have facility agreements with them where they let us use their facilities. We have school partnerships with them to where we actually deliver disability etiquette and Paralympic training in some of the schools. So those partners, here's the other thing from a county standpoint. The Parks and Rec Department are thinking about aging populations within their own backyards and how they can serve that population as they grow older in place here in our area.
Sure.
How can they provide amenities? And so from our standpoint, how could we potentially support them? Our youngest athlete is 3 years old. Our oldest athlete is 84. So we feel like we have the skill set that can help with that.
Sure, I get that, because there's an aging population who need stuff to do, and they might not be as able-bodied as they used to be.
That's right. So then our fourth key partner, and we have tons of partners, but I would say our fourth key partner is the YMCA. We have a tremendous value alignment with them in terms of their desire to help vulnerable populations. They're key community partners, and frankly, they're all over our marketplace. the stat I think is like 15% of the total MSA has a YMCA membership. I mean, they have 150,000 members. So you think about that. That's tremendous reach for us, and they have tremendous resources. So if we look at what's happening within that area, we feel like, and we have been saying this, holding hands with our partners, that we are trying to make Richmond the destination for accessibility in the United States. This is the place where accessibility is done right. And it's not only done right on the acute care side within the hospital structure, but also the quality of life mechanisms outside of the hospital, which are availability of recreational pursuits, which is something we provide. So think about accessibility to the river. Think about the employment infrastructure in terms of how strong our employment is. Everything that goes into the quality of life for that population, we want to make Richmond the ultimate destination. So what we're trying to do is figure out how we have a seat at the table in those conversations, because I feel like the work we do is very critical to the quality of life components of the population that we serve.
Now, is this something that's kind of unique to the Richmond area, or are there other organizations like this throughout the country?
So there are other organizations like this around the country. It's a good question in terms of what the total number is. The USOPC used to track them. It used to be about 250 clubs. There are more than that now, but the USOPC actually quit tracking the number. So there are a couple of national organizations that have either memberships or that try to provide some kind of a structure to the overall kind of atmosphere, to the overall environment of adaptive sports clubs. There's Disabled Sports USA, which is out of Maryland. There's the USOPC, which is out of Colorado. There's Adaptive Sports USA, which I believe is also out of Colorado Springs. So there's all these groups that all over the country, and there's hundreds of them. We are the only Sportable. So we're the only Sportable here in Central Virginia. For a long time, we were the only adaptive sports club in Central Virginia, and we are the only one that offers kind of the array of programming.
Yeah.
There are other organizations that are similar to us, but not quite like us. There's Jacob's Chance, which actually is right here in Score, and Richmond's the world's largest small town, so we know everybody. Kate runs that organization, and she's great. There's Special Olympics, which is not what we do, but it's similar. And so we do not specialize in working with individuals that have cognitive disabilities, and that's a space that Special Olympics fills, and they fill really well. So that's kind of in our area, if you will. The VA hospital has an adaptive sports program that we have a strong partnership with, but there are tons of folks that do adaptive sports through that programming. So adaptive sports has really grown, and there's a number of reasons for that. I should know the name of his wife. I don't, but Prince Harry actually put a lot of emphasis on it through
Meghan Markle?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I don't know how I know that.
Well, you must be reading People magazine. But he put a lot of emphasis on, is it the Invictus Games, which had a lot of national or had a lot of international exposure. And then, the reality is that we've been at war for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
So we have a number of young men and women that are coming home that have a different physical reality than when they come home than when they left.
Yeah.
So providing that resource and that service for veterans, about 10 to 15% of our athletes every year are veterans. And we are mainly able to serve them through collaborations with community partners. So I've mentioned the VA hospital.
Yeah.
There's also the PVA, which is the Paralyzed Veterans of America. Their Mid-Atlantic chapter here is one of the largest chapters in the country. Wounded Warrior has really come back strong, and they have a strong presence here. So, rising tide floats all boats. When a lot of community partners can come together and help a certain population, there tends to be more reach and really more impact. Yeah.
So I want to go back a little bit.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about you and your motivations for this. You mentioned that you started coaching and you fell in love with it. Can you describe for me why you fell in love with it? What was it about it? I mean, I would imagine that you went into it not knowing that you were going to work with disabled or people.
Well, I guess I had, when I sat down with Mark and he told me what his need was, I did understand a little bit about what the population was. I didn't really have a clear understanding of the level of complexities and really the specifics about that population. My grandfather had been a chair user before he passed away, but he passed away when I was 8. He was a chair user because of some complications with cancer treatment. I mean, it wasn't really a strong component of my background, any kind of disability per se. I say it jokingly, but I mean, kind of the truth. I mean, I really was blackmailed into it. I got there. I guess just the connections, right? There's one young man in particular, and he's actually still involved. He's a Virginia home resident. His name is Larry Watson. And Larry still calls me coach. And he still laughs when I see him. And I didn't know any better when I was around these players. I don't know how they were treated in the past. I've got some pretty good ideas now, having been around this world now for over 10 years and being around the population a lot. But I think there were a lot of kid gloves. I didn't know any better. We were going to have a good time, and and I'm high energy in everything I do, right? My wife tells me that's a positive and a negative. But so I bought a whistle, and we got after it, and I yelled at him, and we got to get going. We got to work hard. We got to get here. And you're making it up as you go along. But I have found in most instances in life that if you attack it with energy, chances are you'll be successful.
Yeah.
And that was the way I kind of attacked the power soccer situation.
And how did they respond?
It was great. For them all of a sudden to have expectations about what they needed to do as opposed to getting a participation trophy and rolling out the ball was a completely different, it was a different mentality than what I think they had before. And we wanted them to get better, and we wanted to push them, and we wanted them to have goals that would be achievable. And again, I was making it all up as I went along, but we were trying to figure out how to do corner kicks, and we were trying to figure out how people could attack the goal and be there for a pass. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. The only background that I really had in it was, again, watching these YouTube videos and just trying to see how other folks did it.
Yeah.
And then eventually you would draw in, the community tends to be very helpful. John was a player that lived here in this market, but that had played a lot for the Virginia Beach Piranhas. And so he came, and then all of a sudden he wanted to provide some assistance. And then Matthew was part of that team, and Matthew was a student at Douglas Freeman at the time. So then he would bring some of his buddies to come in on Fridays, and then they would play. And the next thing you know, we've built a little community here of about 30 people that show up on Friday nights. And it was fun because they cared. Because they cared, you cared,
Sure.
They put 100% of effort into it. It was something that they looked forward to just about more than anything else that week. So it became a real celebration. It's something that I really circled in my calendar that I really wanted to do. But it's just that human connection. I mean, that was really what did it for me.
Yeah. And are you still finding that to this day?
Yes. Matter of fact, as we have gotten bigger and we've gotten busier, and we've grown with infrastructure. When I first got here, I think there were 3 of us, and now there's 10 of us. And we've put together some infrastructure. So I'm not as close to it, I'm not as close to the programming. And I know a lot of the people that have been here for years, but we've also added tons of athletes. And so I'll go to programming and I'll see new faces. And it makes me happy that we're impacting the lives of more people, but it makes me a little sad that I don't know their first name and know their parents and everybody else. But I will say this morning, kind of a random day as we do this today, a friend of mine reached out to me. Her parents had seen me doing something a couple months ago, hadn't seen her in a long time, and she teaches elementary school down in Dinwiddie County. And so I'm from Brunswick, so Dinwiddie is down in the sticks.
Down there,
That's right, down where I grew up. So it's like home. So I drove down there early this morning and got to do a school program. And I haven't done a school program for 2.5 years. So I was nervous. It was 4th and 5th graders. But it was great. I got to talk to him about disability etiquette. I got to talk to him about person-first language. I got to talk to him about the golden rule of treating others the way that you want to be treated.
What is person-first language?
Well, it's not seeing the disability first, it's seeing the person first.
Okay.
Right? So that's a wheelchair user. It really is about having the respect and not seeing the disability, but seeing the person. That is the key thing, because that's exactly what all of our athletes are. They're people. They're people just like you and me.
Right.
And for a lot of them that have suffered traumatic accidents, a certain part of their life, they were you and me. And what happened was that there was a bad car accident that wasn't their fault. They dove in a water they couldn't see. We have a number of athletes who have suffered spinal cord injuries because they dove into a wave at the Outer Banks and hit a sandbar. I always tell parents now, especially with boys, make sure they don't dive into waves. So it could be you and me. So make sure you see the person first. And having that conversation with 4th and 5th graders, you really have to take it down to its most basic elements. And sometimes that's so helpful. And I found it so energizing to be doing that today.
And what do you do to take it down to the basic elements? What do you say?
Because you get down to the golden rule. And we have this conversation with our son all the time. I don't care what my son grows up to be, but I look at all the negativity and just all the sarcasm that's around today. And the number one thing our son can do if he grows up to be a good adult is that he follows the golden rule. You've got to treat others the way they want to be treated. Be kind. If you can do that, I don't care what he does, as long as it's legal. That would just make me so proud. And that's what you want to tell students, right? Especially elementary school students, because a lot of them they're not biased yet. Like they haven't formed opinions. They haven't gotten to the point where they're still somewhat sponges. And so if you can relay the fact of A, being kind, but also B, the second part of what I talk about is that our athletes are athletes. They might be there to be a source of inspiration, but they're actually there to kick your butt. Because we ask questions like, why do you play sports? And, you play it because of the ability to have fun and to let go of stress and for peer networks. And these kids are all saying these things, right? These are, 9 and 10-year-old kids. But the majority of answers are they want to win. And our athletes are no different. They're there to compete. So it was fun. I got the opportunity to take a sitting chair. So their principal, a guy named Mr. Bird, really good athlete. So I have him go up, and we're in the gym, and I have him shoot a free throw. And I asked the kids if they thought he could make it. And sure enough, he made it. He's a good athlete. So, and I put him on the spot. You could tell he was a little like, what are you doing? I was like, just take the free throw. So he makes it. Then I get a chair, and I put a chair at the foul line. And I was like, okay, sit down and make the same free throw. And he airballed it. Yeah. Because it's really hard to shoot a free throw when you can't use your legs.
Sure.
And so you start to understand just in that simple little exercise of the skill level and the strength that is needed to play basketball, wheelchair basketball at a high level. So for the kids to see that was awesome. I mean, this morning was...
And the kids were probably all laughing.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
They were. They were giving them a hard time. It was great.
How many of these school programs do you do?
Well, and so that was part of the reason I was nervous, because I haven't done one in 2.5 years. Oh, okay. Josh Sloan from our team. Josh is our he's our community and volunteer outreach coordinator. And Josh is the best. Josh still is, but he was one of our athletes years ago. The young lady that actually ran our outreach program, Kat Anthony, still a good friend personally and to the organization, she left to go head up the Virginia Capitol Trail, which is awesome. And she's doing great work over there. The day that we announced Kat was leaving, Josh called me. And Josh's story, he was actually teaching overseas when his accident happened, but Josh is a quadriplegic, one of our most engaging athletes, but he had the background of being a teacher. And he saw this as being a good fit. And I, frankly, thought it was a good fit too. I thought about it for 24 hours, and I just said, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't you come in and let's see, let's give this thing 6 months and kind of we'll just kind of dip our toe in the water and see if this works. And he was great at it. He excelled. And so I'm high energy, and I have a strong passion for our mission, and it's pretty evident after you're around me for a little bit. Outside of my family, I probably love Sportable the most. However, I'm not the mission. Josh is the mission. Josh is the reason we're here. And so when he tells his story and when he talks about disability etiquette, and here he is as a chair user, and Josh is hip, man. He's Mr. Richmond. He's got the sleeve tattoos, and he's got the cool glasses, and he's got the shaved head, and he's hanging out in Scott's Edition. He's just as cool and hip as anybody. But here he is. He's the mission. He's the reason we do what we do. He does it the best. So he saw over 7,000 students last year. So he's the one that generally executes our student program. As a matter of fact, today, Josh and Shelly Sowers, our athletic director, are they're at the Montessori school over on Parham, where he did a disability etiquette talk for about 45 minutes, and then the kids actually separate and do a Paralympic experience day. So we break the kids up into small groups, and they get to do wheelchair basketball. They get to do sitting volleyball. Then they get to do goalball, which is a sport for visual impaired. So you put blinders on your eyes, and you have a ball that's got a bell in it, and you try to roll the ball and get it past 3 people on the other side. And they have to lay out and stop the ball from coming. And when you play it at its most intense levels, it is intense.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, it's great. And so you get all the kids, and then they get to experience, and they understand that, there's athletic ability that's needed. It's difficult, and I think they have a tremendous amount of respect for our athletes after they realize that it's really hard to do. The best times we can do it is when we have athletes there and they get to show off their skills. Because they're tremendously better at it than anybody else that gets in there for the first time.
Right.
So it's a good chance for them to kind of set the bar really high and to kind of put them on a stage where their skills are really really applauded. So it's great.
What do you think you would be doing right now if you didn't get blackmailed into this?
Uh,
Like, where was your life taking you?
well, what would I be doing? I would do whatever my wife told me to do. I'm good
Well,
at
that's
that.
rule number one
That's
anyways,
rule number one. I was a real estate professional for a long time, kind of fell into it. And I really liked it. There were a lot of elements to it I liked, but there were certain aspects of the job that I did not like. When I was in grad school in 08 and 09, and it was just by happenstance that, the recession and everything tanked in 08. That was not, it actually would have been better for me probably to have stayed in real estate. Because if you had liquidity at the time, that was a great time to be in the market because you could get everything for pennies on the dollar. But I'd left. I'd gone off because that wasn't a career that I wanted. And I had done a lot of soul searching and I had done a lot of research on what would make me happy. I was able to do a lot of work with Craig Anderson, read a lot of books. There's a book called What Do I Want to Do with My Life by Poe Bronson, which is still a book that I go back to every now and then. But it was about trying to find meaning in life. And so I had played sports my whole life. The only reason I ended up at Randolph-Macon is because I could play baseball there. I'd played baseball forever. And when I was 17, that was the most important thing to me. So even though I moved away from athletics as I got older, I still enjoyed some of the things that I talked about earlier, being on a team, being part of a group of people that were trying to accomplish something that any one individual could do. Whenever athletes step away from the game, they always talk about the hardest part is the locker room, not necessarily the competition.
Sure.
It's those relationships. And I wanted that back. And then there was also a certain part of me that felt like, I felt like I probably had some leadership abilities that would not necessarily be taken advantage of in the setting that I was in. Because it was really more just about institutional investment of real estate. I mean, it was about putting investors together, getting a good return, and then going on to the next deal. We weren't building a company per se.
Right.
And I wanted to be part of something that was building, and I wanted to lead people. I wanted to give the Rudy speech and then run out of the locker room. So when I'd gone back, so a funny story, when we're in, where I'm in grad school, and so Chicago is in line. They're asking to get the Olympics. So it's Chicago. I think Rio was part of this, and not Qatar, because Qatar was part of the World Cup, but it was Rio and maybe Switzerland, or maybe it was even Paris, but there were these countries up for the Olympics. It was 2008. Mm-hmm. The United States sends over Obama and Oprah. And we send over like our top vote. We're going to send them over wherever the IOC or the International Olympic Committee office is. That's where they send them as part of the bid. Uh-huh. Chicago has set up this huge celebration because in anticipation of getting the games.
Yeah, I kind of remember this.
Okay, so my wife and I, along with two good friends, fly to Chicago because I want to be there because I think Chicago is a wonderful city. Yeah. I mean, Chicago is one of the best. I still have a good friend that lives there, and I've always loved visiting. It's a wonderful city. If Chicago gets the Olympics, it's a perfect combination of using my skills because it puts me in sports, but they're going to have to build a lot of facilities to support the Olympic Games. Perfect. There'll be the economy will open up in terms of sports-related jobs, and I can be there. And my wife and I had moved to Richmond from San Francisco, and we loved Richmond, but a bigger city wouldn't be bad. The whole thing was perfect. So we fly to Chicago. We can't wait. I don't know if you remember, Chicago is the first city out. They're the first city eliminated. Yeah. Like not even... There's like 4 cities,
right.
And it was supposed to come down to Chicago and maybe Rio. I think Rio got it.
Yeah,
Chicago's the first city out. I am blackout drunk by 2:00 that afternoon. I mean, I am 3 sheets to the wind. What am I going to do? I have no clue. And we ended up kind of recovering and making it a good weekend in Chicago. But boy, that was a real bummer. So we had come back, and I didn't know what I'd wanted to do. I was 30 years old. I was much older than most of the folks that go through that program. Most of the kids that go through that program are 22 and 23. Mm-hmm. And, we had bought a house, and if the Chicago dream wasn't going to work out, what could we do here in Richmond? And I had an informational interview with Rob Ukrop, and Rob was still very involved with the Richmond Kickers organization. And the meeting went well. Rob and I really hit it off. He likes to talk. I like to talk. We were probably there 2 hours. And nothing materialized from that right away, but about, I don't know, a month or 2 later, they had a reorganization within the Kickers operation, and the director of sales job was open. So I applied for that, although I didn't really think of myself as much of a sales guy.
Yeah.
But I applied for that, and I don't know, 60 days later, I guess it came to fruition. And so I was at the Kickers. And, in that time, I was with the Kickers for 5 years, and now I've been here at Sportable for just over 5, almost 5.5. Uh-huh. I mean, Richmond has really become home. Like it's, we've built a life here. Our son is now here. We have a son. He's now 9 years old. He's in school. I really feel like we're part of the community. And never say never. Who knows? I'm not. We could move somewhere tomorrow, but it would have to be an extraordinary opportunity because this really is. We've built a lot here. We really like it.
Yeah. How were you at sales? How did that go?
Well, not very good at first, but not bad, I guess. There was a board member who was really had a good background in sales. And so he mentored me, followed me around the first 60, 90 days.
Yeah.
And he was a good guy. And I had the gift of gab, and he had the gift of gab. And I guess I've always had to become comfortable in my life with, I'm not a hustler, but I'm always hustling.
Uh-huh.
Like, what you're trying to do is add value. And it's a little cliche-ish, but you need to be able to find win-win opportunities. You want people to want them to give you your money because you're giving them something of value. So on the kicker side, it was about tickets, about the experience, about access to, club demographics and who we had that were kind of part of the club. So it was good. And with the guy that was with me, his name was Custis. And so Custis and I would go out, and he was always the bad cop and I was always the good cop. So Custis would go in and just really, really piss these people off and just give them a deal that was crazy. And then I got to go in and be like, isn't he? It's unbelievable, that guy. Listen, but if you would do half that, we would really be appreciative. And then you could generally get them to kind of where you wanted to go. And that was a really good experience. We had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah.
And I did that with him for a little bit. He remained involved. And I guess, sales is really just all about relationships. There was a gentleman I worked for years ago that he was on the real estate side, but he used to always, not make fun of, but he was always skeptical of the transactional broker, the person that was just chasing after a transaction. Because it's not about a transaction, it's about a relationship.
Sure.
You know?
Yep.
And that's, sales, fundraising, anything that involves bringing people together or having somebody pay for a service, it really is about the relationship. And are you creating an environment where it really is a win-win? And it sounds cliche, but if you really do have their interest at heart and their support helps you get to where you want to go, it's awesome. And you get good friendships out of it. And it ends up becoming a very, very positive, a positive relationship all the way around, I guess I would say.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about something that's frustrating you about what's happening with you currently with Sportable. What's bad?
What's bad?
Give me the bad stuff.
Oh gosh. Well, I tell you what, there's so much demand, and I don't know that our situation is different from other nonprofits. You're filling a need in the community that the marketplace is not meeting, right? So when you have a situation where you have tremendous growth because you're trying to fill this need, sometimes your resource growth does not keep up with your operational growth. And so that's always a challenge, right? Is procuring the resources that we need to make our mission possible. Our income is 97% philanthropic. So I feel like I'm constantly fundraising and trying to generate resources. And sometimes you're having to explain to people the value of your work. Now, your best partners get it because they understand the work that you do. Then sometimes it's educating them on what the cost of a program is. Because a lot of times, especially when you say you're doing sports, a lot of people just think you roll out the balls. You show up at 6 o'clock, you roll out the balls, and there it is. They have no idea of all of the work behind the scenes that takes place months before a program even starts, the volunteer training, the amount of medical expertise that's necessary on the front lines of programming, at least in our case, because of the work that we do. So you have to bring those folks up to speed. But, that's a growth story and just keeping up with growth. There are a lot of nonprofits that I think that probably have that frustration. I will say that there's one thing, and I don't know, this is a conversation that the nonprofit community has, not just locally, but nationally. A lot of people, a lot of funders, and a lot of organizations talk about sustainability.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And are you doing something that's going to be sustainable? And a lot of times, I always, you resist the frustration of saying, well, listen, your support makes it sustainable. I mean, there's not a market mechanism that makes it sustainable. That's why we're a nonprofit and not a for-profit. So what we need community to support in order to make this thing go. And so having that conversation, there's a guy that's a relatively big voice in our industry. His name is Vu, and he's out of Seattle. and I forget his first name, but Mr. Vu, and he writes a blog. It's a really good blog. I think it's the Unicorn, Nonprofit Unicorn.
Okay.
But he made a great analogy, and I love using it. So let's assume you're an investor and you invest in Apple, okay? And Apple gave you 120% return in year one. And you go to Apple and you say, Apple, that's amazing. That is just great work. Thank you so much for all you did to be a good steward of my money and give me a tremendous return. I'm going to take that money now and give it to Samsung, because Samsung deserves the right too in order to get more resources. And even though you've done really well, and you gave me a great return, now I'm going to give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
That's a hard way to, so what can nonprofits do? So not only are you constantly as a nonprofit on the resource side trying to fund what you've already done, that problem becomes so much harder when you've got investors or supporters that want to then take it and move it somewhere else.
That does make sense. Yeah. I guess I've never thought of it that way though.
Yeah.
But
So
it makes sense. Yeah.
If you were to offer me $100,000, I would take it in a heartbeat. It would be great. But if one of the conditions was, well, how am I going to make this sustainable? I'd be like, well, I'm going to come back and see you next year for lunch around this time, and I'll probably ask you for the same amount. Or maybe there's a plan that we think about. That's the multi-year giving in terms of operational dollars and supporting mission work. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the unicorn that every nonprofit chases. But if there's a plan in place to where you're going to put it in place for a certain number of years or a certain amount of time, and it's going to be there, it gives you the organizational flexibility and hopefully planning capacity to figure out how you'll bridge that gap when it comes. But a lot of those conversations don't happen. It tends to be 12 months and then you're frantically trying to get those resources. And then as an organization, it's just like hectic. And so you never really have time as an organization to take that deep breath and say, okay, how do we plan for where we're going? And how do we plan to have this funding gap? Because we know A, B, and C are going to stay with us, but D and E might move on. And, it's that kind of intentional thought about strategic fundraising and development. That's a challenge. It's always a challenge.
Yeah. Have you guys ever thought of branching out outside of Richmond, like opening up an office in D.C. or in Raleigh or anywhere?
Yes, and actually, as an organization, had conversations about that work in Hampton Roads, really. And there are a lot of reasons we had thought about it. Probably time for another podcast. But we'd had a lot of good inroads down there, and we actually have a number of athletes that come to us from Hampton Roads. The biggest divider tends to be the tunnel.
Right.
On this side of the tunnel, it's not a bad trip. If you're on the south side, that could be a 4-hour trip,
Yep.
But at the end of the day, there are a number of factors. Probably the couple of biggest is that you tend to need a champion locally.
Yeah.
You need someone in the backyard that really cares enough that can make it happen.
You need a you.
Well, yeah, but I tell you what, the strongest thing in the world is a mother that wants something for their child. There's nothing stronger. And when you can find a mother that needs something for their child that society is not giving to them, because one of our big value propositions is, 35% of our athletes are kids. They can't find sporting opportunities in schools. The community infrastructure of all the community organizations that provide sporting opportunities, they're not set up to equip the kids that we're helping. So how can you look a mom in the eye and say no? So it's almost like you needed to find that mom down there, but you needed someone that cared enough, okay? And in our office, we call that gas. It's the most important thing you can have, and it's give a you-know-what. Mm-hmm. You got to have gas. So you have to find someone locally that cares. The flip side of that, too, is that fundraising is now hypersensitive. It's like hyper-local. Everybody wants their dollars. You want to see where your dollars are going. Right. You want it to be in your backyard, and you have to make sure that your dollars are having an impact. And so what does philanthropy mean to all these different generations? It's funny as kind of our, because we're getting ready to go through the biggest transfer of generational wealth ever, right? This is going to happen over the next 20 years. How do Generation Xers see philanthropy? How do millennials see it? A lot of people want to see it happening in their backyard, right? So it's hard. We knew as an organization it was going to be hard to raise dollars in Richmond to do programming in Virginia Beach, especially when there is a tremendous amount of philanthropic capacity in Virginia Beach that could support programming there. So it's almost like you had to find something there. Mm-hmm. And what we wanted to do as an organization is we wanted to be enough of an influencer that if someone did want to start something there, we could help them do it. We could give them the framework of what needed to be done. And what you needed to do is you need to find someone that can support you. You have a small pilot program, and you can beg, borrow, and steal to get a pilot done. And you get good pictures, and you get one high capacity person out there, and you have them see it. And if they see it, and if you've done your research and you know they have ABC, which is so ABC, do you have access to them? Do they share your belief system, and do they have capacity to make a difference? If you have done your homework and you've got the ABCs and you get somebody out there to see a pilot, then you just need them to give you a chance. And if you do, that can build on itself, but it takes a lot of hard work, and it really needs to be done locally. So I think it's hard. Now,
So you're not saying no, there's just...
you're not saying no, but to think that you're going to go down there and execute programming is tough. Now, we do one-offs. We go to Hampton Roads a couple times a year, and we'll take our equipment down, and we'll contact all the athletes that we know in that area, and we try to bring them together. And hopefully you're creating the amount of energy and infrastructure needed that somebody will take the ball and start rolling with it. But we were hyper-focused on Hampton Roads for a while. We still support that area, but not with ongoing programming.
Do you partner with any other organizations or get together with them for games or matches or anything?
Yes. So so you'll see in our office on this wall right here, this is our programming calendar. So this is 2020. And in 2020, 365 days, we've got a total of about 330 days where we could potentially execute programming.
Wow.
In those 330 days, we have 450 programs. And most of our programs take place at nights and weekends because that's when people recreate. And there's a lot of weekend programming. So we have a certain number of programs that train over a certain amount of time, and then they travel. So our basketball and rugby programs travel throughout the Mid-Atlantic. Our basketball teams did not qualify this year for nationals. If they had, they'd be going to Wichita, Kansas next weekend. Coronavirus notwithstanding, assuming they still do.
Right.
Our wheelchair lacrosse team have a strong squad, a lot of returning players. Chances are they're going to qualify for nationals. That's in San Diego in August. We have individual, like tennis players that will travel up and down the East Coast. We have a tennis player that's actually, I think, later this month heading down to Louisiana for a tournament. So there's lots of travel opportunities.
Yeah. But
the 80-20 rule, generally speaking, is right in a lot of instances in life. So we serve over 400 athletes every year, and I would tell you 80% of them are happy to be out there. It's a recreational opportunity. They're happy to be on the water. They're happy to have an opportunity to go up and down Monument Avenue for the 10K. They could care less how fast their time is. They're just happy for the opportunity to be there. 20% of our athletes are constantly looking to get better. They're constantly looking to PR. They're pushing themselves in goals. So whether their goal is to participate in the Paralympics or whether it's to beat their time by more than a minute, they're constantly pushing themselves. And so one of the challenges we have as an organization within our programming is that we have to provide that to both. A lot of other organizations don't do that. There tends to be a separation. Usually it's about my son's age, right? But 8, 9, 10, you'll start to see that separation between recreational and travel.
Yeah.
Right? And that, oh boy, that's a whole nother conversation. But even organizations that provide both those, they have different tracks for it, and there are different economic models for that. For us, we don't have that luxury. So we have to provide those opportunities for both. And so it just depends. There's kind of a different track for how we accomplish that on every program.
Okay, well, let's switch gears completely. And now we'll do some of those rapid fire questions that have nothing to do with anything.
Oh, good. Well, I should excel at this then.
Tell me about the very first pet you owned.
There were a number of dogs that were associated. My dad was married a couple times, so there were different home situations growing up. The very first pet I owned when we moved to Richmond in 2004, my then girlfriend, now wife, we went to the SPCA and we picked up our cat. And the cat's name was Bonds, after Barry Bonds, because we had moved from San Francisco, and the gentleman I worked for had Giants tickets, and I saw the Giants all the time. And I loved Barry, and so we named our cat Bonds. But then we ended up naming the cat Pooter. And really, the cat's name was Pooter for like the last 10 years of its life. Yeah. And actually, Pooter passed away last February.
Oh, wow.
And the only reason I know, and Pooter was 17 years old, and the reason I know that is because we have 2 new kitties in the house, and they're huge for kitties, but they're getting ready to turn a year old. We have Kai Kai, who is after Kyle Guy from the University of Virginia basketball, and the other is Romeo. And Romeo was just a name that we kept. I really wanted to call Romeo. I really wanted to name Romeo after Jack Salt in some way, shape, or form. And my son loves UVA basketball, so I thought it would work. But he loves Romeo. So I thought I was a dog guy, but then I met my wife, and she's a cat person, so that therefore makes me a cat person.
So no dogs since you've been married?
No dog. Well, no dogs. My mom takes that up. My mom loves dogs. Yeah. She always has dogs, and so if we need a dog fix, we'll go see Mom.
Yeah, so no plans to get one?
Probably.
What if your son says, I really want a dog?
Yeah, he loves those cats. Yeah. I mean, he really does love those cats. And I don't know. I don't think my wife would give in, to be honest with you. My wife, she is a cat person through and through.
Nice. Oh, you mentioned before a couple of books that you liked. Tell me a couple of your favorite books.
Oof.
And why, or just one.
Well, listen, I try to read more. It can be hard. Good to Great is a book I read every year. I love it. I love the principles of it. I think it's a great book in terms of running an organization. I think it's perfect for sports, but it's a team mentality, and there's so many aspects of being on a successful team in the athletic space that you can transfer over to a business setting that I think transfer really well. So I really, really do like Good to Great. And then I'm trying to think, like just in terms of what I've read recently. I try to read. My goal was to read a book a month, which is 12. And I read the paper every day. And I think I'm one of those old curmudgeons. I get the paper. I still want the paper. I don't agree with the paper all the time. Sometimes I wholeheartedly disagree with the paper. But I do think it's important to be an informed citizen and to be civically active. Yeah. And I think reading the paper is an important part of that. Yeah. And I think supporting local news is a big part of that.
Is it kind of a ritual for you too?
Yes. This morning, woke up 5 a.m. I was done with the paper 5:45. It doesn't take long. But every morning it's a big deal. But between reading the paper and then listening to podcasts and then work and everything, sometimes it's really hard to get through all those books.
Yeah.
But there's a book I'm reading now, and I'm a little bit late to it, but it's a book called Nations, and it was a book that came out in 2011, and it talks about how our country is actually a huge group of 11 different nations, and it talks about how when different settlements came over and how kind of the culture and the customs that were instituted when the settlers came are still true today, and how those customs and cultures expanded west with the growth of the country, and how you can still see some of those traits in today's voting, in today's political environment, today's cultures. It's
is
really
that like Dutch and Spanish and
So there was there's Yankeedom, which is the area that's just north of New York, and then it was New York was like New Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And then there's Tidewater, right? Which is in our area of Tidewater. It always kills me when people say Hampton Roads. It's really Tidewater. But so Tidewater was really aristocratic, and it was they were a lot more they were a lot more
colonial,
but also they were just more friendly towards the Queen and towards the monarch and towards the establishment in Britain. But then you have the whole other part of the western state was this Appalachian. That really didn't have any of those traits. I mean, it's a very interesting book because you think about it. If you travel the state, if you go to state parks, if you spend time in other areas, it's crazy how, as you're reading this book, you're like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. Huh. I'm only halfway through it, but I'm really excited.
All right, cool.
So there's the book I'm reading and the book I read every year, which is Good to Great.
All right, last question. Give me somebody that you would love to have a beer with, living or dead, and why?
Living or dead, and why? Well, let me do one of each. Can I do that?
Sure.
If I was going to say living, I would say Barack Obama. But I would actually want it to be like not the Barack we all see. I mean, I wonder if you could actually close the doors and get him to like loosen up the tie and really have a conversation with him.
Yeah. What do you want to talk to him about?
Oh, I want to talk to him about his leadership. I want to talk to him about what it was like to be the president and his journey to get there, and what it was like to be the first African-American president in the United States. And I also would want to talk to him very candidly about what's happened in this country since he left. And if there are things that he could have done differently that maybe wouldn't have affected the amount of hostility I think we have. But maybe, because I'm a Barack fan, maybe I'm just seeing this hostility since he left and Trump came into office. Maybe Trump supporters and people on the far right saw that hostility as far back as when Barack was elected, right? So maybe
from the other side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would just love to have a conversation with him about that.
Yeah, he'd be a good one. You know,
He
probably
would be
talk.
if he was candid, right? Because he still has such a tremendous amount of influence,
Yeah.
and he chooses not to use it because, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, or if he does, he uses it behind the scenes, not in the way that we would all see.
Yeah.
So if someone living, I think I would have to say Barack, and then I'm a baseball fan. I would love to have a conversation with Branch Rickey to figure out what was it that made him reach out and tap Jackie Robinson to be the first African American to play, because it radically changed the game, and Branch really became, you know, he was someone that clearly was anti-establishment, clearly, upset the kind of traditional baseball world, really rocked the boat a little bit. But it was incredibly forward-thinking. You know, we kind of see him as I wouldn't say a hero. I mean, obviously we see Jackie as a hero.
Right.
But Branch was the guy that, I mean, he didn't have to take that risk. His life was comfortable. Everything was fine. He was the leader of one of the leading baseball clubs. He probably foresaw the move west. I mean, he's doing just fine, has tons of success. Yet here he is and sticks his neck out. You know, did he do it because he thought the future of the team dictated that he needed to do this? Did he do it because he thought there was some moral obligation that he had as someone that could present this opportunity, that could change the game? I don't know. It'd be fun to kind of talk to him about that too. And I don't know. My dad's a Dodgers fan. I just think I think Branch Rickey would be a lot. There's probably a lot of Dodgers trivia that we could ask him too. I'd like to ask him about the move to the West. You know, how cool would it be? I don't love the Yankees. Actually, hate the Yankees. But how cool would it be if New York had 3 teams, or even 4? They could support them.
Well, yeah, they could support them, but why? Why would they do that to the rest of the country?
Oh, I don't think we would hate the Yankees as much if there were 4 up there. And can you imagine what a week in New York would look like if you could hit all 4 stadiums?
Yeah, right.
I think it would be. We've tried to hit a lot of the baseball stadiums. We've hit a bunch of them, and it's embarrassing.
Is that a thing that you do? You try to get to every stadium?
I can't say that it's necessarily a goal, but looking at it, I'm not that far away. You know,
Really?
Yeah, I've just.
What's your favorite ballpark?
Camden Yards is the best just in terms of it was the first, right? So if I feel bad about somebody, it's the Chicago White Sox. So the White Sox Stadium, I think, opened in 1990, and it's fine. It's a beautiful stadium. It's great. The very next year, Camden Yards opened, right? Camden Yards changed everything. Every ballpark that has been built since Camden has really gotten back to that old feel, smaller, more intimate setting. And the White Sox are sitting here with this grand thing.
Right.
If they had just waited a couple years, I'm sure they would have done what everybody else did. Camden kind of set the standard. I think the people there are amazing. The customer service, the way it's nestled into Baltimore, I really love Camden Yards. Safeco is awesome. Safeco, where the Mariners play, is great from a design standpoint. So we're big fans of Seattle. So in Seattle, everybody says it rains all the time, but most of the rain occurs between October 1 and March 1. It doesn't rain a lot in the summers. The summers are beautiful. Seattle, so think about this. This was 1999 is when I took a tour there. So Griffey was there, I think. A-Rod was there. So that thing was in design stages in the early 90s, right? There's a gutter system on top of the roof that moves, that feeds into a 500,000-gallon water tank underneath the field. That's the water they use.
That's the water of the field?
Right, because they capture all that water. Like, they're just that forward thinking.
That's ahead of the time for the 90s?
For the 90s?
Yeah.
Well, their basketball facility, because, the Sonics got taken away and they're trying to get a basketball franchise back. Some of the plans were they were going to take all the rain runoff, and then the guy that was going to do it's a billionaire. He had the whole block. He was going to use the rain runoff from all the impervious surface to create a steam power conduction place that would actually power the entire block. I mean, I don't know. I just think that's really, from a construction standpoint, because my background being in real estate and then knowing facilities and the construction of facilities, I thought that was really neat.
So you're looking at the ballparks as, the whole design and that from that aspect, not so much the experience or both.
but I think those are both great. I think Pittsburgh's a great experience.
Yeah.
The Dodgers is a great experience. I mean, you really feel like you're getting back to it. I mean, it doesn't have all those nice, beautiful amenities, but here you are, Chavez Ravine. It's an 8:00 start in the East Coast, so it's 5:00 there. The sun's still out. I mean, there's nothing like being at a Dodgers game too. They're all great. There's no such thing as a bad baseball game. I'm trying to think of a stadium that I didn't like. And I can't really. The Tigers wasn't the best. It was funny because we loved Detroit. That was one of our favorite vacations we'd taken as a family. We loved Detroit, but we didn't care much for Tiger Stadium.
Okay,
it's probably the only negative about the place.
Hey, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you want to give people more information about Sportable, how would they find you?
Hey, thanks for asking. The best place for them to find information about us is sportable.org. I have a lot of great young people that are running our social media. I think we do a great job on social media, mainly because our content is so good about our athletes. So you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. Those are our two primary places. And I think you can also find us on Twitter.
All right. Awesome. Thanks. Hey, you know what? You guys are doing amazing work. This was great.
Hey,
really great talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's it. That's the show. Special thanks to Hunter Leemon for having me over to his office. I'm always so appreciative when a guest will invite me over to their place of work or to their house so we can have a chat and they can talk about doing what they love. Hunter is super passionate about his work. And of course, I'm going to put the links to Sportable and any relevant information that you might want to find out about Hunter and his organization in the show notes so you can go check that out. All right. Hey, thanks for sticking with us. I appreciate it, and we're going to see you next time on the Caught by Happy podcast. Bye. One more thing, if you could, do me a solid and leave me a rating or a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. I would really appreciate it. It just helps get the word out about what we're trying to do here. So if you're picking up what I'm putting down, leave me a rating or a review, and make sure you're subscribed. I really appreciate it. Thanks. The Caught by Happy podcast is powered by Ring Media. Join the Ring Media Network and let's make good stuff together.